This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, everybody, good. Your Honor, good to see you. Welcome, everybody. So today's topic is one that's been in the news quite a bit, which is lab-grown meat. Uh, in terms of its kashrut, in terms of it being kosher, and in terms of it being, is it meat? Is it parava? How would we approach that? And this is really based on a number of very fundamental concepts that we have in kashrut. First, let me read to you a little bit what's going on. For years, the nascent cultivated meat industry has bristled at critics who say that their product, grown with a nutrient broth in a stainless steel vat, is not meat. But when Israel's chief rabbi ruled that Aleph Farms thin cut steak, a credit card sized slab of beef cultivated from bovine stem cells that sizzles, tastes, and smells exactly like its conventional twin is not meat, it was cause for celebration. On January 18th, after consulting with Aleph Farms production research firms in Rehovot, Israel, Chief Rabbi David Lau, Israel's preeminent Jewish authority, when it comes to halacha, so that's different views, declared that olive steak could be considered kosher, permissible to eat for those following Judaism's dietary laws. In fact, he wrote in a ruling translated by Jerusalem Post that olive steak, which does not come from a slaughtered animal and does not have blood, should be considered parava, a vegetable product that is neither milk nor meat. Okay, how does this happen? How does this work? Like most cultivating meat companies, Olive Farms uses a small sample of cells that have been collected painlessly from living livestock to start the cell lines that are the basis of all their products. And therein is going to lie some of the controversy. Okay? For the animal rights, it's great. You have a cell from a living animal, right? From a Jewish point of view, a cell from a living animal. We'll come to that soon. These cells are grown in a nutrient-rich broth in medical-grade bioreactor until they can be harvested as cuts of real meat. A process takes a couple of weeks. By producing meat this way, companies hope to significantly reduce not only animal suffering, the outsized impact of the livestock industry on global warming, and all the gas emissions that result. Okay, there are huge advantages to synthetic meat, says Rabbi Menachem Genak, the New York-based CEO of the OU, one of the world's largest kosher certification authorities. However, as much as he would like to see companies like Aleph Farms succeed, he says he can't agree with Rabbi Lau, even though he is a personal friend. With no disrespect for the chief rabbi, we have a different opinion. Olive steak cannot be kosher. His reading of the kosher laws, meat must be considered in terms of its origins. In the case of cultivated meat, the source animal for the original cell line. If meat is harvested from a living animal, even from a microscopic amount of cells, it is not kosher. The solution, he says, to obtain genetic material from a freshly slaughtered animal. While this might be a bit of a challenge, if it's possible to do, it would be kosher. This would, of course, go against the cultivated meat company's principal selling point: no animal slaughter. Okay, so let's understand the basis of all of this. Hello, Ora, nice to see you. Okay, everybody could say hello to Kathy and to Ora. There we go. Okay, good. Let's begin with Bereshit. Okay, Eila Toldot Yaakov. These are the generations or the events of Yaakov. Yosef ben Shvasrei Shana. Yosef at 17 years old was shepherding Echav, his brothers, the flock. Vahu Na'ar, he was a lad with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. Vayave Yosef edibatam ra'al avihem. Yosef would bring bad news, bad reports about his brothers to their father. What was these evil, the bad reports that he would bring? Rashi says, Kol ra'asha yeroah be'achav b'nei Leah. Any bad that he'd see by his brothers, the sons of Leah, he would tell to his father. One of them being, Shayu ochlin aver min achai. They were eating a limb from a live animal. Now that is something that is one of the 7 mitzvot b'nei Noach. One of the 7 Noahide laws is that you cannot eat the limb that came from a live animal. Wow, that's pretty serious stuff. Yet,
how did Rashi come up with that explanation?
Rashi is quoting the Medrash on this, right? There are 3 things. This is one of them. We're not going to the other 2. These are the 3 things in the Medrash brings that Rashi is quoting, and that is the one that is most relevant to our non-lab grown meat lunch that's being served to everybody right now. Okay, so don't get nervous. All right, what you're eating is not, it's not falling into this category. An interesting shlah kodesh. So what were the brothers actually doing? What did Yosef see that actually was not what he thought it was, but he thought it was Avram and Achai, a limb from a live animal? So there are different approaches. One approach is that if a person slaughters a cow, and in that cow is an embryo, a calf, ready for birth, and then the baby, then they cut open and the baby comes out and the baby is viable, the baby is considered to be slaughtered by virtue of it having been in the mother's womb when the mother was slaughtered. And therefore the animal never needs shchita. So some say that that was that type of animal that the brothers were eating. Okay? If you think that's a little wild, wait for this one. The Shlah Kodesh says as follows. How can we believe this about the holy tribes? Right? Shamati, I heard, quoted in a kovetz, in a compilation. Avram haya avinu asa sefer yitzira, umasli yitzvak. In Kabbalistic terms, there's something called the Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is how one can use different letters from the Holy Hebrew alphabet and can create different things, right? Famously, the Maharal, right, created a golem, right, to help the Jewish people when they were being persecuted and accused and subjected to much by our neighbors. So there is this concept, the Kabbalistic concept of a Sefer Yetzirah. Avram compiled it, gave it to Yitzchak. Yitzchak gave it to Yaakov, to Jacob. Yaakov gave it to him, to some of his sons, those who were Yoter Meyuchasim, because the secrets of Torah are very, very carefully shared. Right? One uses much discretion who to share it with. Al Kain Moshe Gavira, and it was given to the sons of Rachel and Leah, not to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah. And we find in the Gemara that they created an egla tilta, they created a calf every Erev Shabbos through this Sefer HaYetzirah, this Kabbalistic book of creation, book of formation. And therefore, this animal, being that it was not born, ein tzarich shchita, it does not need to be slaughtered. And that's what the brothers were eating. Yosef thought this was a regular animal that was born the way all animals are born, right? And therefore, he told his father they were eating Avram and Achai, but in fact, they were acting within the halachic parameters. Okay, so now what are the issues over here? Okay, if it's coming from, if it is in fact, so as we saw in the article, if the cells now, okay, so coming off the brothers, now let's get very, very practical. If it came from a kosher slaughtered animal, nothing to talk about, right? You took a cell and you allowed it to take in all of this kosher plant-based food, whatever it was that it was immersed in over there, and it multiplied, split, millions, billions of times. Everything is perfectly fine. It was a kosher cell, and it multiplied. Now you have many kosher cells. We could discuss meat or pareve soon, but let's just discuss the kashrut status of that cell. Perfectly fine. The issue is it was taken from a live animal, and we're not allowed to eat anything that comes from a live animal. However, yes, Esther?
What about milk and milk products? That comes from a live animal.
Good. Excellent point. Right. Esther asked, can you guys hear or not? Esther asked, how about milk? Milk comes from a live animal. And you're right. There would be grounds to perhaps prohibit milk that comes from a live animal, right? And the Gemara learns out that milk actually is permitted if Israel is extolled as the land that flows with. Then milk must be a permitted item. And there are those that say that the reason we have a custom to have dairy products on Shavuot is because until that point it wasn't clear, right, what is the status of milk based on Esther's issue. Is it Ever Min Achai, right? But it's not Ever Min Achai. Correct, right? But it's not suffering from a cell being removed either, right? But I think it's also an idea of an aver. Is it a part of the living animal that's not meant, that's not meant to be taken while it's alive? The milk is something that that is made for export, right? Whereas the aver is not made for export. Okay, milk it's produced in order to express it and for it to be given to others. Okay, so then the question then is, this cell is prohibited, but I'm not eating that one cell. I'm eating billions of cells that came from this one cell. So we have a concept called bittul. Bittul is something becomes nullified, right? All we need is 60 to 1, and it becomes nullified, bitul. Here you've got billions to 1. Okay, so there's a concept when it comes to bittul, an important concept to understand. It's called in halachic jargon chanan, which is the Rashi Tevot for chaticha na'asit nevela. And that is as follows. If a drop of milk falls into, let's learn the halacha, okay? Let's learn halacha on the second side. Oh, I'm so sorry, those who are over here. Let me keep you all current. My apologies. 1 second. There we go. That was the shla. And here we have the Code of Jewish Law. Good. Okay. So, nafal chalav, l'toch kedera shel basar. This is the laws of basar b'chalav, 92.2 in Yeridea Code of Jewish Law. A drop of milk fell into a meat pot, right? Not just a meat pot, a filled meat pot. You had a good meat stew, and one of the kids goes running past with a cup of milk, and some milk splatters, falls into that pot. The problem is one piece of meat, it wasn't a big soup that everything was immersed. It was a whole stew, and you have a piece of meat sitting on top over there, right? Sticking out. Let's go with that, right? It's partially submerged, right? Partially out. And it fell onto that. So what we need to do is we need to assess that piece of meat. Since it didn't fall into the gravy where it gets mixed with everything, it fell onto that piece of meat, we have to assess. Im ein batam chalav, if there is no taste of milk on that piece of meat, hakol mutar, everything's allowed. It became nullified by that piece of meat, and we're good to go. But if that piece of meat has been compromised, has a taste of milk, nesra otuchaticha, that whole piece becomes prohibited. How do we know?
You gotta taste it first.
Alan, right? Uladidan. So we point out that typically in the past, earlier, before the time Shulchan Aruch, they would call in a non-Jewish chef who has a very, very particular palate, right, to determine is there the taste or not. Uladidan, but according to us now, so there we need shishim b'chaticha. We need to assess, is that piece of meat 60 times that drop of milk? If it is, everything is fine. Continue on. However, if it does have the taste of milk, now, and then that got mixed up with the rest of the stew, now, misharim bekula imhaya bekol mashish bekeder mechaticha vayerek v'marach v'tavlim kedei shetehei chaticha zu. Now I start to assess all that's in the pot, the rest of the meat and the vegetables and everything else that's in there. I need to have 60 times the size of not the drop of milk. The meat, that piece of meat that's been compromised. Chaticha atzman na'asit nevela. That piece itself has become transformed into a nevela. Nevela means non-kosher. Since it first fell on that and it compromised that, that now becomes chatichat isur. That becomes a whole piece, that whole piece of meat is asur. Now I need to assess the entire pot versus that piece, not the drop.
What did they take it out? Why 60?
60 is considered that point where it will no longer be tasted.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Mathematical, you have to, that's what, that was the Metzius, means that was what is. Meaning they used to call a chef, right? And less than 60, he'd be able to taste it. More than 60, he would not be able to taste it. There's a certain nullification that happens, a dilution that happens at a certain ratio, and that is determined by halacha to be 60-1. Okay. So now let's go to 92.4. Continuing there. Lo amru chatich asman nasan leveil el b'basar b'chalav. Interesting. The Shulchan Aruch, which is how the Sfardim would rule, say we only say chanan, chaticha nasit nevela, when it's basar b'chalav. Why? Because there it makes sense to say that. Because the milk is permitted, the meat is permitted, it is the mixture, the cooking of the two together that creates the isur, and therefore it all becomes asur. Aval lo b'shar isurim. Gon kazay chalav shenivla b'tchaticha ve'ein ba shishin levatlo. The nesra of akak bishla or chalev. Sorry, if some forbidden fat fell onto a piece of meat, and you don't have 60 of the meat versus that piece of fat, so then that meat falls into a bigger pot. There you only need to have 60 versus the piece of fat. Why? Because only basa b'chalav, where this is permitted, milk and meat, permitted together. That is the kryptonite, that is this new essence. So the whole thing becomes aser. But when you have meat, when you have chalev, forbidden fat, that's right, a piece of meat that's a bit fatty, right? And how healthy it might be, right? But that's not a problem with halacha. We're talking about the fat that comes from the back of the animal which we don't eat. That's animals that sacrifice, animals which in a time of a temple would be sacrificed, and certain parts, certain fats need to go onto the altar that we're never allowed to eat. So some of that got mixed up onto a piece of meat. So there the Shulchan Aruch says it will not turn the whole piece of meat into an isur, but rather if that piece of meat then falls into a bigger pot, I just need 60 versus the forbidden fat. The Ramah disagrees. The Ramah says, V'yesh Omrin, that those that say that by all isurim we say chaticha nasit nevela, not just by milk and meat, by anything that's prohibited. We say the whole piece becomes usher, and we need 60 verses it. So we might say over here, okay, let's see. We have that prohibited cell, right? And now it became 2, right? So we could say over there that each time you don't have 60, so what happens? The second, now it's split in half. Both of those are usher. Right? Now it splits again. I don't have 60, all 4. I don't have 60 times all 8. Right? That each one is becoming, because it's really plant-based stuff that it's ingesting, that the cell is ingesting and then splitting. But I don't have 60, so each one retains its din of asur. I don't have 60, so now it all becomes asur. According to the Shulchan Aruch, that would not be a problem. According to the Ramah, it would be a problem. Why is that? Because again, Shulchan Aruch says we only say that it itself becomes part of the Isser when it's basar b'chalav, milk and meat. Here it's not milk and meat. Here it's meat and plant. But according to the Ramah, it would be problematic because now it's split. Now I've got some plant and some meat. Do I have 60? No. So now I view this all as usher. It splits again. I got more plant and meat. Do I have 60? No. So it's going to continuously be all usher.
What do you mean you got more plant than meat?
I started with one meat cell.
Okay, just you started with one Alan. If Alan eats a garbage truck of salad, right? I don't turn mostly into salad. It doesn't matter what I eat.
Yes. But Alan keeps splitting in half. Splitting and splitting and splitting and splitting.
Right, that just becomes more Allens. It
Huh?
doesn't become more salad.
Okay. So let's understand halachically. Alan's making a very good point, and let's understand why that is. Okay? Because were I to say how much of this, how much genetic material do I have here that started from the cell? And how much genetic material do I have from the plant that it's been eating, right? I've got a gazillion to 1 genetic material from the plants and not from the animal cell. However, and I'm a little bit out of order here on the source sheet, so let's go a little bit. Okay. Yeah. Let's go to Rambam down the second one from the bottom. Before we come to Alan's issue, we have these kosher chef schools because you're not only not allowed to eat milk meat mixtures, you're also not allowed to cook. Lo tevashel, the pasuk says, do not cook the milk and the meat together. So either you're not going to eat it, or not allowed to cook it. So there's been a proliferation of kosher chef schools. Now, why do non-Jews or non-kosher eaters like to add milk into a soup? What does it do? It makes it creamy. Okay. So I've got a great idea. I've got a massive soup I'm making here for the shul, right? And I've got in there 600 ounces. Okay? So I'm going to add, now, 1/60th, right, would mean I could put in, how much could I put in?
10.
I could put in 10 ounces. So you know what? I'll put in 8 ounces. I'll put in 8 ounces
Of milk?
of milk.
You can't.
Why can't I?
Because your kavana, your intention was to do that. And it's
Okay. Ein mevatlin issa lechatchila. Right? You're not allowed to go ahead and, of course, Alan, you're not allowed to go in and decide, oh, I'm going to add in a small enough amount of prohibited food that it'll become batal. If it fell in, we make that assessment. If you got 631, we're good to go. But aim of vatlin isla you can't go and deliberately go and do that. So isn't that what's happening over here? Right? Why kind of yes? Well, kind of yes, I hear. Why kind of no, Dove?
Because I think you're completely distanced away from whatever you started.
Well, I'm only distance away because I've added in so much.
There's also
It's changed. It's not the same.
Alan?
There's also no prohibition of mixing a cell with a plant.
But I'm adding kosher ingredients to a non-kosher ingredient in order to nullify that non-kosher ingredient. That's going to come up soon, but not quite yet.
That's not their intention, really.
Let's see what the Rambam says on this. The Rambam, yes.
Is it non-kosher because it's Irvine and
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The cell is non-kosher because it came from a live animal. Let's take a look at the Rambam, second one from the bottom, Laws of Forbidden Food, chapter 15. It's prohibited to take a Torah prohibition and be mavatel it, nullify it, right, deliberately, in order to go ahead and do that. Vim vitel, if it was done, hareze mutar. If you did do it, the fact is it's permitted. The afal pi came, but even so, konsulto chachamim. The sages penalized that person. Va'asu hakol, and prohibited it. The yearly, the Rambam says, it seems to me, shekem shu kanas ein ozet zeh ela al zeh haover shebitel isur aval acherim hakol mutar. It would only be usher for the one who did it, but for others it would be permitted. If you shouldn't have done it, if you did it, it would be permitted for others. So if that's the case, in terms of this issue of going ahead to nullify, deliberately nullifying, right? So as long as you're not working in the factory there doing that, right? I, the consumer, we could argue that it might be batel. But there's another major problem here. And so far, again, we're only talking about kosher, non-kosher. We haven't yet gotten to dairy meat. Okay? Meaning, if we were to do it in a kosher fashion, if we decide that this is problematic because it came from a cell that was Avram and Achai, from a living animal, But if I got it from a kosher animal that was slaughtered properly, and I took out one cell or a group of cells and started the process, that would be okay. Let's hear, though, why when it is just one, it's right from a non-kosher animal, or from an Evim and Achai, kosher animal, but from a living animal, why it's a problem. Amar Rav Yehuda, the Mishnah Avodah Zarah. Okay, further up on a little out of order, I apologize. Go up to the second source in the middle of the page. Thanks, Dov. Mishnah Avodah Zarah 2:5. Amar Rav Yehuda, Sha'al Rabbi Yishmael Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yishmael asked Rabbi Yeshua when they're traveling on the road. Amar he said to him, Mivnei ma gvino tagoyim. Mivnei ma asru gvino tagoyim. Why is cheese made by non-Jews? Why is that asur? Now, what's the issue? Amar lo nation ma'amidan oto bikeva shel nevela. Right, the way cheese typically had been made, still often is made, is using rennet, an enzyme in the stomach, and that is used to curdle the milk. Well, it is curdled using the stomach of an unslaughtered animal. Okay.
How exactly are you getting the stomach from an unslaughtered animal?
It says stomach contents.
Carcass.
Yeah, of an animal carcass. Right?
The animal's dead.
Animal's dead. Yeah.
So how is it unslaughtered?
Kosher slaughter. We're talking from Gentiles. They shot it in the head. They hit it over the head with a hammer.
So let's say the animal was shechted by a rabbi. Then you can still make cheese out of that
rennet. Yes.
Rennet, whatever?
Yes.
What?
That's not a power. Yes.
Yeah, but that's still mixing a.
No,
Never mind.
it's not considered mixing because it's an
There's
enzyme.
a thing called kosher rennet.
There's a thing called kosher cheese. Yeah.
So the problem with the other cheese is not basar b'challah. It's
Correct. It's not basar b'chalav. Correct.
That's taking something that's meat and putting it into something that's.
Except that it's not considered meat. That's another issue. If you want, we can do a lunch and learn on cheese making and how it's kosher. Okay. So, but the issue here is how much rennet. Oh, let's go to Shulchan Aruch now. 87:11. Hamami ba'or kavet nevelo treifo behema tmeya. If you curdle using the skin of the stomach of an invalidly slaughtered animal or a non-kosher animal, right? Oser, it will prohibit that cheese b'kol shehu, no matter how little, no matter what the percentage now is of everything else that got added in, all the milk that got added in, right? And with this curdling agent, you got a lot more than 60-1 of milk to this curdling agent. Nevertheless, it is all asur. The Ramah says, Mishum, the davar ha'asur ba'atzmo uma'amid, when something is, in itself is prohibited, and that is what is causing all that follows, meaning what caused all that to follow? What was the agent that created this cheese? It was that infinitesimal amount of rennet. That afilu be'elef lo batil. Even when it's 1,000-1, no matter what it is, it does not become batel. It can't become batel. Everything that exists only exists because of that. So over here also, right, Rabbi Ganak from the OU will be arguing with Rabbi Lau of the chief rabbi and saying there is no bittul over here. This started off as something that is asur, prohibited. This cell from a live animal is prohibited. And I don't care if 10 billion cells came from that. It all comes because of that one cell. All the plant additive, all that plant stuff, what do they call that? Stuff. We'll go with stuff. All that plant stuff, without that single cell, Not going to happen. And therefore, this will not become bata. Like Alan said before, right? We might have a lot of Allens, but all the Allens that we have are only because of that original Allen. And without that original Allen, no matter how many Allens, it's irrelevant. They're all considered to be Allens.
But I can argue that original animals were not born animals, right? They were created by Hashem as animals, and every animal that came after that was created from that original animal that was not born.
Oh, so you want to say that they're all...
Yeah, all of them came from the original.
So according to that, the Torah should have never said that you need shechita. We see we don't view the animals in such a manner. An animal
Right,
that was like the Shloh said, that was Sefer Yetzirah, that was Kabbalistically created, right? So then that will not shechita. That will not need shechita. But once once God made his creations, all that followed have its laws, right? We redeem a firstborn son. We don't say, well, they all came from Adam, and Adam wasn't born, right? Right? We look at each one as it comes. Okay? So therefore, the concept of Beetle, it seems, Rabbi Ganak, was starting with something that is prohibited, starting with a cell that is prohibited. Everything that comes from it comes from there. There is no Beetle, because that is the ma'amid, that is the agent that's bringing about everything, and therefore it's going to remain asur. That seems to be, though this is a joke, or is this something to say?
It will never be kosher lepesach.
Okay. So that's Rabbi Ganak's point over here. It would seem that we started with something that was asur. It's never going to become batel and become mutar. Yes, Alan.
My famous question. What if you're growing a fake chicken? Chicken doesn't need shechita.
Of course it does.
I mean,
Chicken needs shechita.
not
Fish doesn't need shechita. Chicken needs shechita. Whereas an animal, the shechita needs to be, there are two simanim. There's the veshet and the kana, the trachea and the esophagus. When shechting an animal, majority of both of those need to be slit. Okay? By a chicken, majority of one of them needs to be slit. But it needs shechita. So we're still having the same problem. Fish would not be a problem. Fish does not need shechita at all. So fish would not be an issue. A fishu, Dove. Okay? Okay. Now, so coming back. So let's say we started, though, with a single, or with cells that were from a slaughtered animal. We started with kosher cells. So then it's perfectly allowed, right? Environmentally, it's all good. Only one animal was slaughtered, and then I'm sorry?
How do you get a live cell out of the slaughter?
So I'm sure that the moment you slaughter an animal, right, all the cells don't die.
When is that? When is the slaughter?
I'm sorry? It's slaughtered when I've cut the neck. Okay? If right then I would then, take off one of the limbs or take some cells, right? Now I wonder, this is my own wondering. No. Right? There they use stem cells, right? Every cell has in its DNA, right, all of the coding for every cell in the body, for every type of cell in the body, right? And each cell only has certain parts of that DNA activated, right, to become that organ, a heart cell, a brain cell, a blood cell, a skin cell, a liver cell, muscle cell, right? If we can get to the point where we could deactivate and reactivate, meaning if I could take a hair cell, there's no issue of Avram and Achai when it comes to a hair. If I could take a hair cell and reactivate the parts of the DNA that it should start to now become a meat cell, like stem cells, can go any which way, right? Interesting. Okay, we're not quite there yet. But let's say now, let's deal with one last issue. Let's say I've got my cells harvested from, right. We've managed to navigate the problem you raised, and we can get living cells, viable cells from this shechted animal. Okay, and now we've put it into this stainless steel vat, right? And we added all the stuff that we added, right? Right, in a nutrient-rich broth, right? And now we've got ourselves billions of cells, and it looks like meat, tastes like meat. Basically, it all came from that meat cell, right? Is it going to be meat, or is it going to be parava? Because keep in mind, the issue that we had, that there is no beetle, right? Because this was the agent, the ma'amid. That was when we're talking about something being usher, something that is prohibited. But here, everything is perfectly permitted. So over here, I might look at, we started off with 10 cells, added in a gazillion gallons of this nutrient-rich broth, all under power, all plant-based. So now when I evaluate what is what, so there maybe I could say bittul. Maybe I would say that it becomes parava over here. That's interesting. There does remain one issue which over the years we've seen it become less of an issue. And for that, let's go to the very last source. Haggah, the Ramah says, Nagu lasot chalav mishkedim. Back already in the 16th century, right? They had the craze of almond milk. But there's a problem, right? People are dipping their chicken and their meat into their olive milk. Umanichem ba, they put into it basar, oaf, chicken, hoil the enu rak midrabanan, right? That they could put in. Why? Because chicken and milk is only rabbinic. Why is it only rabbinic, Alan? Because he can't cook a chicken in his mother's milk. It's only rabbinic. Aval basa behema. But if you want to put some meat, real meat, into your almond milk broth that you have there, yesh laniach etzel chalav shkedim. You have to have some almonds strewn on the table next to your olive milk container, mishum marit ha'ayin. Otherwise, marit ayin, it looks like milk and meat. Similar to, as we said earlier, Sim and Samach Vav, in regard to blood. What blood are we allowed to eat or drink? Fish blood. It doesn't sound all that tasty to me, right? But it's permitted. Well, if you're having any fish blood, you have to have some scales on the table next to that, so it's clear that it is fish blood. And you should know that back in, must have been the 1970s, I think, is when it became very, very common, or started to proliferate, the non-dairy creamers, right? Maybe 1960s, 70s, the non-dairy creamers. Initially, the kosher certifying agencies would say if you're you can't put out, right, caterers, after a nice meat meal at a wedding, you're serving coffee, you can't just put the milk out in any sort of containers. You have to put it out in the container that says Pareve non-dairy milk creamer. Now already, right, we're surprised if the milk is dairy. Oh, you drink cow's milk? Oh, I thought it was oat. No, it's not oat, it's rice. Oh, no, soy? No. It's actually right, it's hard to find regular milk now. I remember when I was a teenager, one of my parents' friends had a watch factory in the city, and they got this massive delivery, came in really late, and all the workers had gone home. So the parents' friends called and said it's sort of I could round up some friends, and we would go into the city, go to the factory there, and package all of these watches. And they paid us very, very nicely. It was very easy to get a bunch of friends, right? We didn't get home till like 2 o'clock in the morning, but I think they sent us back in a cab, not the subway, right? And so they ordered in dinner for us, right? And after the dinner, they had cheesecake. So we all like, ooh, right? We my parents' friends, they know we're kosher, right? So we said, is this dairy cheesecake? They said yes, but the meat wasn't right. And nowadays, forget about it. You don't know what meat is meat, right? Is it the incredible burger? Is it whatever they have all the names for it? The impossible burger, right? What is it, right? So nowadays, the marit ayin issue is not really an issue. We have so many parava meat substitutes, parava milk dairy substitutes that will no longer. I don't think the maris ayin issue would still be such an issue for us, right? However, the bittul issue, right, would need to be discussed further. But it would seem to me that if we could get a line started from kosher cells, then certainly that would be allowed in terms of it, and that might even be able to be considered to be parava. Of course, we can have kosher pork using this because that is starting off with non-kosher. The Avraham Mamid, that which began it all, is something non-kosher. So, and that's without that, that is the basis for everything that follows, the Ma'amid. So therefore, we can't go from there. So what will happen, right? I'm sorry?
We have kosher bacon.
We have fakin. Yeah, we have kosher fakin, right? No kosher bacon. Yeah. And even that, the OU had some issues. Strangely enough, I didn't understand it. The OU had issues giving the impossible pork, giving a hefsher to that, right? Impossible burger, fine. Impossible pork, they didn't want to give because of the name pork. I didn't really understand that. We actually did a piece on this a while ago because there are kosher OU certified bacon bits that you can buy. So it's not like, anything with bacon, the OU doesn't feel they can give their name to it. So I don't know if pork worse than bacon. I don't know. Yes, Gabriella.
So my husband at OC Kosher, he was like, all of the kosher bacon is called beef fry. Like it's not labeled bacon. So I mean, they go.
Yes and no. Okay. If that's the case, fair enough. But I believe, actually, I had a picture of it that I had when I did Lunch&Learn on this, that the OU has OU certified this container of bacon bits. Yeah.
It's not real bacon,
I know it's not bacon.
but it's called.
Right? But if the OU does not want to give certification to impossible pork because it's called pork, even though it isn't pork, but yet, so why are they okay giving OU certification to bacon bits, even though it's not bacon, but it's called bacon? Yeah. So that I'm not sure about.
So why do we decide that we're going to side with OU over Rabbi Lau?
Okay, so Alan asked, hello, Ateret. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Great to have you with us, Ateret. So Alan asked, why are we going to go with Rabbi Genak over Rabbi Lau? Okay, Rabbi Lau is not a kosher certifying agency. He's a chief rabbi of Israel. Is he there supervising? Look, if he has his own agency, maybe you'll say the Rabbanut Yerushalayim is under his auspices, right? And if he's not there. In order to do kashrut, you need to be a company that does kashrut. You need to have people there on the place.
So you're saying if Rav Moshe Feinstein made a ruling that goes against the OU, you would go by the OU?
What I'm saying, no. What I'm saying is that if Moshe Feinstein would say this is allowed and would have a team that's there certifying it's being done properly under supervision. And so then, according to Rav Moshe Feinstein, it's fine. According to OU, it wouldn't be fine. So a person would decide, do I want to eat Rav Moshe Feinstein's certification, or do I want to eat the OU certification? So to over here, Rabbi Lau says it's allowed. Okay, but what's the story with the supplements? What else is going in over there? Do you know that, right? What else is being involved over there? Okay, so you need to have some sort of eyes on the ground there, boots on the ground.
So if Circle K decided that we're going to follow Rabbi Lau's ruling, and Circle K is going to
That's Circle K is a reputable Orthodox certification agency. If any reputable Orthodox certification agency would say, yes, we're going to adopt the ruling of Rabbi David Lau, we're going to give certification, that's perfectly fine. And then everyone would need to decide, right? Typically the way we approach these things is, if it has an OU or an OK or the Chaf K or the Star K, if it has any one of those that are on the CRC or Rabbi Idolitz's, because the IVK, Irvine Kosher, is on Rabbi Idolitz's, but not on the CRC. So if it's on any one of them, just because we don't produce and send things around, so they don't, we're not on their radar, right? So then, right, the Beth Jacob kitchen practice is, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Beth Jacob kitchen practice is, if it's certified by either one of those recommended, then that's something that we can serve. And that's what we would do, right? An individual, after this lunch and learn, would I imagine want to know, well, what is the OK doing with this issue of a ma'amid? That's something that I would like to, having learned into this, I would like to discuss with their rabbanim, right? How do they deal with the fact that it's a ma'amid?
How does Rabbi Lau deal with it?
I don't know. Right? Again, this is I don't think he issued a teshuva. I don't think he wrote up a halachic opinion. I think he gave an interview. Right? He declared that olive steaks could be considered kosher.
So there's
all right. In a ruling translate, I would need to see his ruling. Right? It does not come from a slaughtered animal. Does not have blood. Should be considered pareve, a vegetable product, neither milk nor meat. Yeah. So if he has a written up teshuva, then I would like to see that and see how he navigates these halachic issues that I and my esteemed colleagues here today have examined. Yeah.
I mean, but in Israel, right, the OU doesn't carry as much weight as it carries here. In Israel, they have hundreds of their own certifications.
Correct.
So chances are those certifying agencies would follow Rabbi Lau, no?
Okay, so in Israel, the kosher certification gets very, very entangled, right? You've got those which are government sanctioned, right? The Rabbanut, right? The rabbinate of Jerusalem of each town has its right, which is sort of under the auspices of the chief rabbi, and then you have many other private certifications, right? And typically, the private ones are considered to be stricter and more reliable than at least some of the very small town rabbinate ones. So everyone would do what they do. Right? What's our minhag? We have different opinions. That's our minhag, right? As the story often goes. Okay.
Is there a charge for certification?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There is. Well, yeah. There's a charge of certification because there's manpower involved, right? There's manpower involved that it needs to be, and it's not just certification; it's supervision, right? And a lot of time, effort, expertise goes into that, right? Now, what's interesting is if any of these big companies would want to have the OU, right? Is even though the percentage of kosher eating people is very, very, very small. Nevertheless, the kashrut industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry because there are many people, non-Jews, who want to look for certification on it. And that is when there is a general distrust of what's going on and of government agencies that supposedly guarantee this or that. So people are willing to pay, well, it usually isn't paying anymore, right? Would prefer to buy something that they know has an independent eyes on it, besides just the government's supervision. So it's very possible that some of these companies would decide to have, to start. I don't think Peter would go crazy if there's one slaughtered animal and they take from there and they go from there for the rest of ad infinitum, that they're just drawing from there and developing, keeps going, right? So then that would satisfy the OU requirements and would probably open it up to not just the kosher world, even those who are not necessarily kosher observant. Yes, Leah, and then Your Honor.
I wonder if they harvest the stem cell, okay, which is what the meat, and then they put it in this big soup and stuff and give it flavor of meat. Will it still be considered?
Yeah, so actually, Olive Farms is cultivated from these stem cells, right? But the problem is these stem cells are taken while it's still alive. That's the problem.
But it's not in a bar. It's like it's in a bar. It's like it's a part of the body, right? That you can see. The stem cells, like in minute something. How it's.
I don't think that would make a difference.
How can it be considered an aver?
So you're right. A cell is not an aver. An aver means a limb, right? A cell is not an aver, but we understand that to mean consuming anything that came from a live animal, meaning prior to its proper shechita, prior to its proper slaughtering, would fall into this category of aver min achai. Yeah.
So you said.
This one saying, Your Honor.
When I was in law school, and halal certification wasn't available like it is now. I had a classmate, a Muslim, who would only go to kosher butcher.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And many religious Muslims, right? So if halal is not available, right, when halal is not as available as, or where it's not so available, often you can find OU, so that's what they will buy, right? The kosher certification covers the Muslim requirements for their food, allowances. The Muslim does not cover the Jewish. Yeah.
Isn't it ironic? The stem cell is also in the plant. They have so they get along.
That's an interesting thought.
So, But so you're saying the bracha would be, there's a case to be made that it would be hard? Like, or
Yeah,
more
the-
so than it would be meat?
correct. Because this bittul, right, that we said that the mamid cannot become batal, that's when there's something that's prohibited. If everything is mutter, then it might very well become batal. Yes. Okay, we'll call it over here. How's Northern California, Ora? We miss
Cold,
you. We miss
cold.
you down south.
I know, I know. I will stop by one day.
Good. Tara, good having you with us. Kathy, good seeing you. Okay. Best to Jerry, please.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Be well, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.